Ladies and gentlemen, can you hear me out there? No, you can't? You okay? Anyway, welcome to the joint Special Operations Association, Special Forces Association, POW MIA Symposium. Before I get started, my boss, the president of SOA, would like to say a few words.
Thank you, David. We're so blessed to have, in my opinion, the best committee chair I've ever seen in Mike Taylor run the POW MIA Joint Committee from the SFA and the SOA. Dave Gordon stepped into big shoes and he's filling them and running uphill. He's done a great job, not a good job. We were so blessed, those of us who attended Mike Taylor's interment at the Punch Bowl, to receive an invitation to the Hawaii laboratory of the DPAA and got this unbelievable tour from General McKeague. These incredibly smart scientists are going to be here. The detachment commanders, in addition to our old friends, the three amigos, Jack Cole and Matt and Steve Thompson. We have been blessed as an organization to be associated with the DPAA. You're going to get one of the best talks today from some of the best people in the world who trace down remains and in the language of the Defense Department, account for them. This is a world-class scientific presentation. I'm so glad to be a part of it. Welcome to the 47th annual meeting of the Special Operations Association. As long as the rest of us are still standing, the DPAA and the POW MIA Committee are going to be a very, very important part of our group. Thank you, Fern, for coming from DC. Thank you, Larry, from coming from Hawaii, and the rest will be introduced as we come. Thank you very much. David?
First thing I'd like to say is please turn off your cell phones. I got mine off. That's always one of those things. The other thing is we're not going to have formal breaks during this presentation, so if you find the need, just please get up and quietly find your way. We'll promise not to call out your name. Now, I'm not going to be able to go off script, primarily because I don't have a script. So that's how I'm going to work this thing. I'm going to start out with, I would like all the Gold Star, any families that have current POW or MIAs or had families who are POW, would you please either raise your hand or stand up? This briefing is for you. And for all of us to get an idea what we're doing to bring our service members back. Excuse me a little bit. Okay, the presenters we have, as our president identified, are from a couple of different groups. The first presenters will be from the National League of POW MI families, and Dr. Jay Veith will do that presentation, and you'll see these people. They don't need to stand up now. You'll see them as they come on. Our next presentation will be from Mission POW MIA, and that'll be Executive Director Dave Huffman. Then Mrs. Fern Sumter Winbush, who is the Principal Deputy Director of DPAA. For those of you who don't know what that is, I think it's called Department of POW MIA Accountability Agency, which is either, if we say DPAA. She will be giving a presentation on what's going on, what they're doing, where they're going, what their plans, what their current missions and planned missions are. The last will be a group briefings from a combination of DPAA and DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, on what happens. It's going to be a linear progression going from the start of when they actually identify some remains to all the way to when they let the family know. And the case history is going to be of one of our own SOG members. Then we will have an opportunity for questions and answers afterwards. I ask you please to hold them till afterwards. We're on a tight schedule and trying to get wrapped up into that. And questions and answers during the briefings, we may not make that schedule so everybody can get out of here for lunch. Okay. I would also like to introduce members of the POW MIA committee who have been so helpful to me in putting this together. We have, we have Wade Ishimoto in the back. Just raise your hand, stand up if you want. Mike Elan, Jack Call, Jim Lathan couldn't be here. He had another emergency. John Tiltmeyer, Cliff Newman, Glenn Nichols, and Jim Kimo Wheeler. They've all been such a tremendous help to me. Thank you. Now, before we get started, I want to talk about, all of you have seen these posters that have been in the room. These posters came about with the help of a number of people. It's an idea that I had when I first took over, or didn't take over, when I was first pushed into the chairmanship by a few of the people. Anyway, it's an idea I had, and when we went to Hawaii, I saw that they had these posters on the walls in the lab area, not in the lab itself, but on the halls in the DPAA Hawaii. And in the enthusiasm that Dr. Tu, who was the pathologist who took us through the tour, she had, when she says, we see these, we have these up here, when we find somebody, we're able to identify the photo with the individual by name and photo. And super enthusiastic. Well, that re-energized me to try to do something similar to this. I had it in my head. Fortunately, I ran into Jeannie Huffman and a trip I made to DC. Jeannie, please stand up. Jeannie, and whose father is also MIA. And she said, I've got this. Thank you very much, Jeannie. She says, I've got these ideas, and I've got a lot of stuff in my computer. So we started to work on this through the internet, back and forth. And then with the help of Bonnie Cooper, Kima Wheeler, Jack Cole, Bruce Christensen, who's a vendor out here and is very involved with finding people, we were able to start putting names, faces, and everything together to put together these posters. I really wanted them for this conference so all of you could go and see and look and say, hey, I know this person. Geez, I worked with them. Let's bring them home, okay? So that's the history behind the posters. That's the history behind how DPA got involved, because I kind of did my best to arm wrestle both Colonel Brennan and Director McKee on let's get how this happened. So I want to thank you all for being here, to join my enthusiasm of what we're trying to do here. I'd like to turn it now over to Jay, first speaker. Thank you.
I started the clock, okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Jay Veit. I'm the Executive Director of the National League of POW Families. I have to put my glasses on because I'm getting old now. So it's a pleasure to speak to such a distinguished group. I wanted to spend my allotted time providing you a quick summary of the League's involvement with SOAR, our present circumstances, and our future plans. As you know, for over 50 years, the National League of Families has pressed U.S. and foreign governments to ensure the fullest possible accounting for America's servicemen and civilians missing from the Vietnam conflict. During this long journey, we have been superbly supported by SOAR and other veteran service organizations who share the same goal as the League, accounting for our missing, educating the public about this important issue, and ensuring that today's servicemen and women know that no one will be left behind. I wanted to take a short minute to outline my own history with SOAR. I attended SOAR in 1998, shortly after my first book, codenamed Bright Light, had been published. Nope, backup one. This book was a history of all the POW rescue operations during the war, mainly on the Joint Personnel Recovery Center, which was a part of SOG. So I'd come to SOAR after the publication of the book to discuss with several of the special operations officers who had led the bloodiest POW rescue operation of the war, Operation Crimson Tide. They were Heine Adderholt, the first commander of the Joint Personnel Recovery Center, a man named Frank Jacks, the ground commander for Operation Crimson Tide, and a man named Mickey Schultz, who was one of the leaders of the rescue force. Here is a picture of him at the convention. So Heine in the middle, Jacks on the left, Mickey on the right. This was taken, I think, at the dinner in 1998. I won't spend my time going into details of the operation, but basically, Chu Hoi had informed the U.S. military in September of 1966 that an American was being held in a POW camp in Chungcheon province in the Delta. Adderholt asked for a SOG team to raid the camp. Jacks, who was at Khartoum at the time, was picked to lead the operation. Next slide, please. There's a picture of Jacks and the Chu Hoi in the morning of the operation. Unfortunately, as the helicopters carrying the raiding force approached the LZ, a terrible rainstorm hit the area, making visibility very difficult. The raiders were landed eventually in an open field between two encamped and heavily armed Viet Cong battalions. Heavy weapons fire hit the raiders, killing 2 SOG NCOs immediately and a whole bunch of the Nung raiding force. Several U.S. helicopters were shot down and one of the warrant officers was killed. The raiding force was forced to spend the night in the open field surrounded by the VC, but eventually the VC retreated and the raiding force was picked up the next day. No American POW was sighted. I'm telling you this story for one reason: to acknowledge that, like you, the League understands the terrible cost of war and the difficult mission of accounting for POW MIAs. Unfortunately, this is a very difficult, very emotional, very frustrating, almost intractable issue. And over time, other groups have arisen, frustrated by the inability to solve this issue, but like an illumination flare, they go up very quickly and then they come to the ground and burn out. But for over 50 years, the League, strongly supported by veterans like yourself, has been steadfastly committed to the fullest possible accounting. That longevity and dedication to the truth has earned the League the ability to speak to senior government officials on both sides of the Pacific, a position that laid the groundwork for the recent upgrade in relations between the U.S. and Vietnam. Listen, it's no secret that earlier in the year, the League was nearly insolvent and was forced to take drastic measures. However, a very generous donor funded the League, providing we continue 2 missions, we continue our responsible accounting efforts, and we complete our archival preservation project. This incredible gift from the donor enabled us to once again press the various governments of Southeast Asia to provide increased support to account for our missing servicemen. So with our new funding, the League is moving forward on many fronts. We are completing the digitization of the massive files of the League that provide researchers in the future a very rich history of the twists and turns of this issue and its influence on U.S. Indo-China relations since the early 1980s. Our membership is growing, our social media footprint is rapidly expanding, and we are expanding our contacts with numerous organizations and individuals who remain concerned and supportive of our sacred mission. In summary, the League is doing much better and moving forward rapidly. Equally important, we plan on traveling to Southeast Asia later this year to speak directly to key leaders about improving their cooperation, particularly on archival documents. To accomplish that mission, we look forward to a close partnership with DPAA so that we may work jointly together to achieve the fullest possible accounting in the shortest possible time. Despite differences of opinion on how to accomplish this mission, the League fully supports DPAA and sincerely desires to reestablish an outstanding working relationship with it. Also, there are many other plans in motion, but in summary, the League is again at the forefront of our long-standing and crucial mission to ensure the fullest possible accounting for American fallen heroes. I wanted to end by telling you a short story about the meeting with Heine and Jacks. So we're all sitting there together, and Jacks is relaying to us how when he got off the helicopter, it was raining so hard that it physically hurt him. He said it was hitting me so hard it actually stung. And Heine looks at him, and I won't try to mimic Heine's very distinctive Southern drawl, but he looks at him and says, sounds like it was raining harder than a cow pissing on a flat rock. The problem, that's only half the story. The problem is that Jax was from Czechoslovakia and Schuler was from Germany, and they had no idea what Heine was talking about. So they look at him, and then they look at me, and then they look at each other, and you could just see on their faces a true whiskey tango foxtrot moment. What is this guy talking about? Anyways, thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody might have about the league and its future directions after this meeting. Thank you very much. And as the artillery says, on time and on target, baby.
Thank you, Dr. Blythe. That was great. Next will be from Mission POW MIA, and that will be Dave Huffman. Thank you. Dave?
All right, so everybody knows who I am now and who I'm with. Dave Huffman, I'm the Executive Director of Mission POW MIA. Truly honored to be here at this meeting. Our first time being able to talk to you all, because up until February of this year, we didn't even exist. So our organization, you go next slide. Our organization formed in February of 2023. We launched a month later in March of 2023. And since then, we've been nonstop. And we plan to continue at full speed ahead, or as our admiral, that's our president says, at flank speed. So this is our mission objectives, and it's summed up in the acronym SEARCH: seeking the fullest possible accounting for missing Americans, engaging with partner organizations, advocating for the families of the missing, researching and investigating case resolution, conducting outreach and education, and honoring the service and sacrifice of not only the missing, but also their families. Next slide. I'm going to show you a bunch of different things that we've been up to. This is the first thing about our membership that I want to tell you, is it's open to everybody. It's open to all wars, all past conflicts. It's open to any concerned Americans. It's open to any VSOs. It's open to any civic groups. We just had our first VFW post join us as a founding member. Our membership is rapidly growing. We're doing much better than we expected in such a short time. And we have representation. Our main body of representation is from the Vietnam War, but we do have representation from World War II and also from Korea Cold War. The folks that you see here in that picture, there's some World War II veterans that we were at an event with just a couple of weeks ago. The guy on the far left fought in World War II, Korea, Vietnam, flew 37 different kinds of aircraft. So you meet some amazing people out here on this journey. Next slide, please. We do a lot of public engagement. The Welcome Home event in Washington, D.C. Anybody able to attend that? The Vietnam War Welcome Home event? We spoke to about 1,000 people in our tent. We set up displays. We have mannequins and equipment used during the Vietnam War that we take around with us for educational purposes. And that's some of our board members up in that top picture. Parades. This family down here is the Wood family. They're from Illinois. Tracy Wood's one of our board members. And Tracy has 3 MIAs in her family. 2 from Vietnam, her and her husband, and then a cousin that they just recently discovered from World War II. You'll see Cindy Stonebreaker Reed doing a talk to Rolling Thunder in North Carolina. And that was a big Memorial Day display that we did at the Norfolk International Airport. That's my full-time job. Everybody in our organization is a volunteer. I'm the chief of police there at the Norfolk International Airport in Virginia. Next slide, please. This is our website, www.missionpow.mia.org. Very simple, very quick. Every day on social media, we post the missing from the Vietnam War. We also are posting World War II and Korea Cold War cases. Just coming up in 2 days is Staff Sergeant Stubbs, one of yours, and he'll be posted on October 20th. The messenger bag is our new newsletter that we send out quarterly. You can find it on our website in a flip book, so if you haven't received it, take a look so you can see what we're up to. And then finally, you see here our social media presence, but this particular picture right here, that's the Norfolk, Virginia Tides baseball. They're the Orioles minor league team, just won the International League Championship. We were there for POW MIA Day with a display, and we did a slideshow during the 7th inning stretch for 11,000 people that saw our MIAs. Next slide, please. We do poster campaigns, just like these up here. This is a poster campaign that we did with Sons and Daughters in Touch, the Vietnam War commemoration, and the Vietnam Veterans of America. It went out to over 500 VVA chapters. We've also done a separate one for VA vet centers that went out to over 300 VA vet centers. Those are all the missing men from the Vietnam War. Next slide, please. The special event posters. Every week, we release a poster of the men missing by state. You can find that on the website. And then posters such as this. Next slide, please. The Department of Veterans Affairs invited us to lay a wreath at Arlington National Cemetery this past Memorial Day. And while we were there, I did notice that there were no POW-MI flags in the march of the parade of flags that come into the theater. So we addressed that through another partner with the VA. And on Veterans Day this year, our treasurer, Michael McPherson, will be carrying the POW-MI flag into the Veterans Day ceremony. So there will be a POW-MI flag in those services. Next slide, please. This is some of the government events that we work with. We have a relationship with DPA that we like to say is collaborative and positive. And that's the way we're going to keep it. We're their customers. And we want to relay information to them that helps bring somebody back. So the more positive we are, I think the more positive our families will be. And that's what we're after. We want people to still have hope. And we want people to be ready for when those remains come home, that they can give them that proper welcome and that proper burial. So we work with the DPA at the annual government briefings this past year. I had the honor of sitting in on 9 case reviews with families, to listen to the analysts, to ask questions, to help the families, and help them with research. We're also just are doing a trial program now where we just started purchasing satellite imagery for another researcher to help with case investigation. So there are things that we are doing for individual families to try to help them get those resolutions that they desire and need. We've been working with U.S. government officials, partnering with other groups. You see that picture on the far right? That's our president, who used to work for a little group called the DPAA at one time, Rear Admiral John Kreitz, and he's standing with Rick Downs, who's the Korean Cold War family representative. And we do outreach with a lot of other groups. Next slide, please. Most recently, we had the honor of being up at the United States Institute of Peace. And we were able to meet and directly engage with the Vietnam Office of Seeking Missing Persons. We met the ambassador to the U.S. from Vietnam, and we met the U.S. ambassador to Vietnam, and we met the Prime Minister. And we had a chance to speak with them directly about our organization, our families, our cases, and our concerns. And I want to say that it went very well. This picture on the lower right-hand or lower left-hand side of the screen, that's my wife, Jeannie, and another family member named Colleen Shine. They were invited to the Tech Talk luncheon, not as a representative of Mission POW-MIA or any other group. They were invited as Gold Star daughters to show the success. Colleen's dad has been recovered, and they were also there to show that work still needs to be done. Jeannie's still waiting for her dad. So that was another opportunity to engage, and we were happy to do that and very excited about that opportunity. Next slide, please. This was our first event in Washington, D.C. We did a meet and greet breakfast after the annual government briefings. The Gary Sinise Foundation sponsored this event for us. So we had about 50 people, I think, in total that came to that event and shared a breakfast and shared a lot of camaraderie, and we were very excited about that. Next slide, please. Finally, we do a lot of one-on-one engagements. You might recognize a couple of these guys, Paris Davis, Melvin Morris, a couple of your folks, signing our POW flag. We take that flag with us everywhere we go, and you see there's lots and lots of signatures on it. And we have it here today, and we'd be honored if some of you would like to come up and sign that flag when the opportunity presents itself. Next slide, please. Finally, that's how you can find us. Take your phone out, hit the scanner, and you can find us anywhere that you may be that you have internet. I am, again, so thrilled to be here, and on behalf of our families, I was asked by several of our families to please relay their thank you to DPAA, to Stony Beach, and to the SOA for your continued efforts and what you're doing to bring our families home. Thank you all.
Our next guest presenter from DPAA will be Mrs. Fern Sumter Winbush. Thank you very much.
And go ahead and hit the next slide, please. Well, good morning. It is awesome to hear our partners really step up and acknowledge that it's important that we all work collegially and collaboratively together. We can't do this mission by ourselves, and we all have to form this community of accounting in order to get answers to the families. When we talk today about the numbers of accounting, just please remember, we're not being insensitive, right? And it's not about the numbers, it's about the families that we touch every single day. So as was mentioned, my name is Fern Sumter Winbush. I'm the Principal Deputy Director here at DPAA. I've only been in this mission a short amount of time. I signed on in 2015, only expected to be here for a couple of years to help the agency stand up. And frankly, after meeting the families, most importantly, they were the ones that really have encouraged me along the way and are the main reason why I'm here. In addition, though, I would also be remiss if I didn't talk about our wonderful staff. We have about 700 individuals working in DPAA. I have a few with me today, and I'm going to talk very fast because I want to be done in 10 minutes so you can hear the rest of the story, which is the most important piece about what we do every single day. I want to thank the POW MIA committee and so the SOAR president for always including us, always making sure that information that we provide is accurate and important to recovering those who have gone unaccounted for so long. Special ops, especially special operators, you know, you all have been in harm's way intentionally, and your efforts have been undercover, clothed in secrecy, and so it has also made it a very difficult accounting mission effort. And so without your involvement, what we do to recover these men, we would not be able to do what we do. We need your help, so thank you so much. I want to move on and talk a little bit about the agency, what we've done to date, and how far we have come. Go to the next slide, please. So I'm going to key in on Vietnam War, but let me just start from a higher level. There are over 81,000 who are still unaccounted for from our nation's war dating back to World War II. It is daunting. It is challenging. As you can see, the numbers across the board are at a level that requires everybody in the community to work together. With the Vietnam War specifically, it remains our most challenging mission, not only because of time, but because of the fact that the soil in that area is acidic, it's eating away at the remains, and I'm not going to get into the lab piece, but largely the portion of remains that we are getting out of Vietnam can fit in the palm of your hand. So time is not on our side. We've got to get this done, especially with the Vietnam War accounting. For FY23, we accounted for 158 total. Specifically, there were 4 from the Vietnam War, 115 from World War II, and 39 from the Korean War. So we are making progress. We are still doing everything we can in our within our powers to account for more individuals from Vietnam, which is why the Vietnam War remains DPAA's primary priority. We have been working hard also to build resources, get resources for our mission, which is largely what I do. I'm not an operator, I'm not a scientist, I'm a resourcer. I grew up in the Army as an intel officer, but largely I ran garrison, so I know how to go after other people's money in that 5-sided building. You know, I'm dressed like this for you, but this is also how I dress in the Pentagon when I'm out there taking other people's money. And so thanks to the DPAA staff, and I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about all of the veteran service organizations, to include our partners who advocate for us every single year. And let me just announce today, hopefully this is not new information because it's been out there for a while, but we've gone from a $125 million budget in 2015 when I first arrived to FY24, should we get a budget because we're still under continuing resolution, $196 million. Huge. Thank you for that. And just to put it all in perspective, for those of you who have served, we know how money flows in the government and in the military. And for us in DPAA to be able to acquire such a large increase in our funds, that was in lieu of some of the other, I would say, pet projects that the department had, right? They saw DPAA's mission and they heard your voices and listened. And so thank you for anyone in this room that had anything to do with that. In order to move the Vietnam War effort forward, we have what are called consultative talks and tech talks, where we hold with the host nations, specifically Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. This year was no different. And I forgot to mention Colonel Matt Brannon, who is our Deputy Director of Operations. He was here last year. He was the one that attended the tech talks and consultative talks. And he wanted me to relay that he had a hard choice to make. He had to choose his daughter's wedding over attending this, and so he chose her over you. But I'm here. I'm here. The talks went very well. All of the Southeast Asia countries support our request for increased operations, which, as you can imagine, when you go from 150 million last year to 196 this year, that means there's going to be a lot of boots on the ground, or in my case, a lot of pumps on the ground. But we're going to be in those countries executing this mission at, to its fullest possible accounting. The other thing that we're doing in with relation to the Vietnam War is with the country of Cambodia. Cambodia is coming along. We've had to pull them in many instances, but they have not only supported our increased operations, but they are also supporting a Cambodia initiative where we are helping them to select 5 master candidates, master degree candidates that will attend the University of Hawaii, hopefully sometime in the near future. Now, there's a whole lot of bureaucracy that we have to go through on both sides, for US and Cambodia, but we are very close to getting those scientists to Hawaii and have them attend the master's program. Now, that's not only good for, obviously, good for Cambodia, but it's also good for relations, right? So this mission has been supported by a lot of relationships over 5 decades. But you know what? We have to continue that. We have to go after the next generation. And so this is one effort that we're doing to get after that challenge. We also were able to, and many of those of you who have been following our efforts in the region, there are losses that, and I can't be too specific for obvious reasons, but let me just say that we were very successful in getting the Lao and the Cambodians to agree to allow us to go into an area that each of them claim is theirs. And so that is huge. That was even before DPAA was established. And so you can imagine, it's relatively easy to go into the specific countries to do recoveries. But what happens when it's close to a border or there's a disputed area? It makes things very difficult. And it's taken us a couple of decades to get to where we are. So hopefully, fingers crossed, we will be able to get to that site this year, this fiscal year. I talked a little bit about the budget. I will say that under this continuing resolution, every year we plan our operations unfortunately, in anticipation of a continuing resolution. So we don't front load our missions, right? Because we know that if there's a budget issue, we won't get to a lot of those sites. So right now, for the first quarter, which runs from October to December, we are executing as planned. We don't have any issues. Yes, money is short because when you're under a continuing resolution, you don't get a piece of the funds for your current budget. So we didn't get a piece of the 196, we got a piece of the 150. So we're behind, but still able to execute. Next slide, please. I want to talk a little bit about, quickly, FY 2023 missions that were conducted. 8 JFAs, a lot of recoveries, a lot of investigations, and as I mentioned earlier, all of these countries have been staunch supporters of DPAA and our efforts. COVID really impacted us in 2020 to 2022, slowed us down a bit, but I will tell you that, especially with Vietnam, they have been very, very helpful in not only supporting our teams on the ground, but then also helping us conduct recovery missions. And so we are greatly appreciative. Also, we have a huge partner effort. And when I say partner, I'm talking about nonprofit organizations that are bringing in equipment, bringing in expertise. They're either part of a non-governmental organization, or they are universities and private citizens. When I first arrived here in 2015, we were just standing up our strategic partnership section, and it was all of Dr. Tom Holland, for those of you who know him. It was all of his effort that had, birthed what we are experiencing today. And so in Southeast Asia, partnering was not really widely accepted. We have hugely overcome that to the point where we are actively pursuing those efforts and have conducted partnering operations in 2023. Next slide. 2024, as I talked about, with the huge increase in our budget, this is almost a 300% growth in our operations on the ground. All of those dollars that I talked about aren't lining our pockets. They're going towards operations, and they're going towards bringing on personnel, whether it be researchers, historians, additional anthropologists, more partnering missions in order to grow our accounting effort and recovery efforts. Cambodia, as I mentioned earlier, is coming along to the point where there will also be a U.S. naval ship that will be off of the coast conducting survey of that area. So we are very enthusiastic about what's to come. We're very happy that over the next 5 years, our budget is where we need it to be. So please don't ask for any more, because we don't have enough people to execute any more dollars. But at the end of the day, I always tell groups that you could never, in the government, build an agency large enough to get after 37,000 unaccounted for. But because the department listened to us, because the department listened to you and listened to the families, DPAA is in a good position to not only grow our operations on the ground, but to most importantly, account for those who remain unaccounted for, with Vietnam War being our most important priority right now, with about 80-ish%, more than 80, I don't remember the exact number, 80% of our operational budget is going towards the Vietnam War accounting effort. So I want to thank you. I'm going to get out the way so the rest of the team can come up and talk to you about some cases. And then lastly, Dr. Parr is going to bring it in. She's going to talk about the lab. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Winworth. Next will be, Matt Kristoff will be the coordinator for the next series of briefings. Matt?
Thank you, Mayor. Slide. One more. So I'm not going to tell you guys about Hickory, because you know about Hickory Radio Relay Site. We're going to talk about the case. For us, it's known as reference number 1753, and it was the loss of Sergeant Sergeant John Jones, and Staff Sergeant John Keviani. As you know, Keviani was captured, Jones was killed at the site, and we were struggling to find his remains. So I just want to talk about, we're setting this up to give you a virtual tour of the lab by talking through this case. It's a case that's near and dear to your hearts, which is why we picked it. So we first got boots on the ground in this area in 1993. And shortly after that, we didn't get a lot of information in 1993, but we were trying, back then they were trying to get to every site, boots on the ground at every site where a man was missing. And shortly after that, a number of sites went on a restricted list because the Vietnamese considered those sites sensitive for some reason. Sometimes it was border regions, sometimes they had their own sensitive equipment at the site. Sometimes there were bandits, is the way they described it to us. They had other activities going on and they thought it was a little dangerous. So this site went on the restricted list in 1993, so we couldn't get there. But we had a lot of research to do anyway because we had to find the right people to talk to get us to X marks the spot on the ground to tell us where Sergeant Jones' remains were. Hickory doesn't look like a big site, but I know a lot of you guys were up there, and if you were going to dig for remains, it is a pretty darn big site. You have to narrow that down. So we started looking for witnesses. The way we find witnesses is we do the enemy order of battle research. And we knew the enemy units that were engaged up there, but we knew the big picture, and we had to start winnowing down into the subunits and find surviving veterans from those units. So we started doing that. Since we couldn't get up to the site anyway, we had to get our ducks in a row before we put boots on the ground up there again. And we started going through these units that you see. We were also talking to ARVN vets, we were talking to Americans, and around 2008, the Vietnamese were talking about this site coming off the restricted list. At about that same time, and it didn't happen right away. First they talk about, we're looking to take the site off the list, and then it's probably a couple more months to several months of negotiations before you actually get people in that area. It's not a real fast moving process, but we also at this time were finding the right witnesses. And so things were starting to come together. We also had an American come forward with photographs, handheld photographs of the site that were taken before and after the fight. So a lot of things were coming together at this point, and we felt that we had enough to put together an investigation proposal. So we're expending resources. It takes a lot of money, helicopter blade hours, fuel, a lot of personnel, EOD types, everybody else, medics. You guys know the team, the way teams are organized, and Steve's going to be talking about that in a minute, but we have to put together a good plan on what we want to do in the field to convince our leadership that this is something that we need to expend resources on. So we write that investigation proposal, we staff it, it gets approved, and then we could send folks to the field to do the field research. And so Steve Thompson is going to come up. Steve did a lot of different things, but one of the things he's proudest of and did a fantastic job at is he was one of the early team leaders in the field. So Steve's going to talk about where the investigation went with boots on the ground. Steve?
Hey, good morning, everybody. Good to see you again. Morning, Uncle Ray. Long story. Okay, so again, I was asked to talk about investigations, and hopefully these presentations will just kind of tie everything together, where we start, how we begin to look at a case before we get boots on the ground, what do we do on the job, on the ground, how do we get to a site and all that. Dr. Parr will get into all the specifics of that. So what's the job of an investigation team? Investigation team's job is basically to find a spot on the ground that we can correlate to a known loss. And that can be done by a number of ways. It can be done by witness testimony as part of the puzzle. It can be imagery from the wartime. It can be archival records, either ours or our former enemies. Vietnamese have given us many, many documents over the years that really helped our investigations. So, and then hopefully we'll gather all this information, talk to a couple of witnesses, and hopefully one of them says to us, yes, I know where the site is, I can take you there. And then again, it's the investigation team's job to get to that site, whether it's a crash site, whether it's isolated burial, get to that site. If it's a crash site, hopefully find information, wreckage, for example, with part numbers that we can correlate to a known aircraft. If we can identify the aircraft, we know who was on board that aircraft. That tells us we're at the right site. Different parts, different wreckage in the, from the aircraft can tell you there was one individual in the aircraft when it crashed. Other parts can tell you, wait, no, there were two. So now we know we're at the right site. There's two individuals that were in the aircraft at the time of the crash. Go back, put together a excavation proposal, and go from there. Slide, please. So here's generally our team makeup. I think last year, Wade Ishimoto asked for a slide like this. So our team leaders nowadays are normally rank of E7, normally an Intel senior NCO. There's a lead investigator who is normally a analyst, civilian analyst. Many of them are retired from military, did this job on active duty, and we were impressed with them so much that we kept them on as civilians. Scientific recovery expert, or SRE, as we say, is an anthropologist who goes with us, and if we get to a site, they do the survey. They do the scientific survey. One of the things that we were kind of lacking in the past was, I was, not being an anthropologist, asked to go out and find crash sites and do surveys. And I had help from graves registration folks, and we would take pictures, and we had GPS, so we knew where we were, and we would try to map things out about 20 meters this way, 30 meters that way. But again, none of us were scientists. We couldn't look at the dirt or dig or do stratigraphy or any of the things that these guys do to figure out, okay, these are the parameters of the site. So we did the best we could. But at one point we got smarter, and so we started putting anthropologists on the recovery teams. I'm sorry, investigation teams. Another member is a Stony Beach strategic debriefer. Bottom right individual looking this way is Dave White. He's a Stony Beach debriefer. We have a team sergeant, linguists, of course, medics. Our medics are normally 18 deltas. Dr. Sievert over here is one of our, you're 18 delta, right? Right, Doc Sievert's one of us. Sometimes if we don't have SF medics, sometimes we'll have Navy independent duty corpsmen, but they're all at that skill level where they're capable, they're trained, they're experienced to work in austere locations, separate from a medical facility, and they can keep people alive, they can keep people healthy, keep them in the game. Life support investigator, these are folks who, I mentioned aircraft wreckage a few minutes ago. So these are guys that could look at a part of the ejection seat and say, this is from an F4B. Well, how in the world do you know that? Well, this is part of Martin Marietta ejection seat system, and it was only in the F4B from 1968 to 1970. And those guys are that good. If they find the right parts, they can really help tell us we're at the right site. On the recovery teams, they can help the anthropologists, direct the recovery itself. And EOD. You'll see in Dr. Parr's presentation, there's ordnance, unexploded ordnance everywhere. And so we have EOD guys with us to keep us safe. Slide. Okay, here's kind of the makeup of how the Vietnamese team looks like. The team leader, nowadays, is a senior colonel that we work with all the time. He's a Army colonel. And then other members of the team are either a Ministry of Interior, now they go by Ministry of Public Security, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and then kind of a mix. And then as you go down in their government administration, so the top guys are all from the Hanoi government, and then you get to Quang Minh province, and they'll have a couple of guys from the province. And then you go down to Bo Chak district, and the district will have a couple of guys that they add on. And then you go down to whatever village, and they'll have a couple of guys go on. And that really kind of helps things happen when you're in the field. Slide, please. Okay, so these I want to show you the steps that where we got to the point in the investigation of this case, how we got there, and then we got to the point where we said, okay, we think we want to dig this site. So there were seven investigations over that period, 93 to 2010. Vietnamese also did a lot of their work on their own. We would talk to a witness who identified another witness. The Vietnamese would say, well, let's see if we can find him. Vietnamese would go out and find the guy and then bring him in, and we could do a joint interview. So there's a lot of unilateral work being done at the same time. 1993, first team visits Hickory. But again, like Matt said, we're on Hickory. We know we're on Hickory, but holy cow, where was anything? We didn't know where was the combo bunker? Where was this? Where was that? So it didn't tell us a whole lot. September 1988, we interviewed an Arvin who said that John wouldn't surrender, so that Pavin killed him. March of 7, interviews with former senior Pavin officers with knowledge of the attack on Hickory. They weren't there, but they were aware of it. December 07, interviewed some more interviews. One guy, this gentleman said, we captured one and we killed the other. And that matched up, because we knew they captured John Caviani and we suspected they killed John. And then we had an American researcher step forward and give us photographs of the site before and after the incident. And I believe those are in Dr. Parr's briefing, and so you'll appreciate those. Okay, slide. And then the last interview we did before the excavation was we did a re-interview with the photography, and that kind of helped us tell us where we are, we knew we were at the right place, and where we wanted to dig, and then we'll go from there. But the reason I put all those in there is to show you that, investigations are kind of like an intel cycle, where you got analysis, and then it's passed off, you got collections, and then it's passed off to an analysis, and then sometimes it goes back to the top. So sometimes, for example, you go out and do an investigation, and the Vietnamese say, this is the guy who, he was there, and you talk to him, and you realize, no, this is not the right guy, he wasn't there, he's talking about another incident, and you have to go back. Or sometimes you get to a site, and say, no, this is the wrong site. So sometimes you have to go back to the beginning and then go over again. So it's not just a linear process. We go until we hit a brick wall, step back, okay, where do we need to go from here, go again, and that's kind of what I was that was my point of what I was trying to show you. Okay, slide. And I will be followed by Brad Taylor from Stony Beach. Thank you.
Good morning. It's great to see everybody again. I'm glad that Steve just talked about the third quadrant on my slide right here. So I guess I can skip over that one. No, I'm just kidding, Steve. No, Matt Kristoff. Oh, by the way, I'm Brad Taylor. I'm the chief of the Defense Intelligence Agency's Stony Beach team. And Matt Kristoff contacted me to coordinate this presentation, and he said, hey, I want you to talk about Stony Beach's role in the progression of John Jones's case. And so I did my research. I said, great, sounds like a good idea. So I did my research, and I learned that our role in the progression of this case is very limited. And then I realized Matt was setting me up for failure. So what am I going to talk about? No, I'm just kidding, Matt. No, what I'm going to talk about is, in general, where Stony Beach fits into the accounting process. And then I'll talk about our limited role in this case, other than the fact that we do participate on the joint field activity, official field investigation teams. So I've shared with you our mission many times. You see it up there. What I'm going to talk about today is the gathering and reporting part of that mission statement, because that's where we fit into this process. And I'll get into more detail. So everything we do, all of those folks you see that belong to our team, which isn't very big, all of the training, the language training, the strategic debriefing training, and even attaché training, that is all to enhance our capabilities to gather and report information. So that's the cycle, and I'm just going to go into it in a little more depth than Steve did. It all starts off with DPAA, and I hope you can see through this illustration how important Stony Beach's relationship is with DPAA. It's symbiotic, and it starts with DPAA. When they identify information gaps in cases and in the mission that are preventing us from advancing those cases or the mission. And then, as a community, we come together during a biannual conference called a case coordination conference, and we determine how to best find information that fills those gaps. And oftentimes when they determine that we need to interview a human being or do some research in the foreign language, that will be tasked to Stony Beach. And then we take that and we use all of our resources and figure out how to best accomplish this. So in the planning process, we then execute that plan. Once we execute that plan, we report the information that we find, and we send that back to DPAA. And then DPAA will evaluate that information and let us know if we found information that filled that gap, or if we need to go back out and find more. And then that process starts all over again. So that's where Stony Beach fits into the accounting process. Now, in this instance, with the case that we're discussing now, with John Jones's case, Stony Beach reported on this case twice, and this was back in the 90s when a couple of guys tried to peddle some fake remains to us. Now, this is an important part of our mission, even though it rarely leads to success. There's a lot of false information out there, but every once in a while we will get something good. For example, that's how Stony Beach recovered Norman Payne. It's also how we got Al Boyer. So being in touch with folks who have contact with those remains traders is one of our focuses, one of our areas of focus. But in this case, that's what Stony Beach did. But now I'm going to be followed by Matt, once again, who will talk about how we propose the excavation of the site.
So at this point with the case, we thought we had enough information to dig. But again, we're expending resources. We can't just go dig willy-nilly wherever we want, send a team in. We have to write a detailed excavation proposal. And it's a rigorous process, and it's a rigorous process for a reason, because an excavation team costs even more than an investigation team, exponentially more. And so we have to get it right as we can get it. So we write that excavation proposal, we put all the historical information that we know about the case into it, all the information that we've discovered in the field and from our research, and then we staff that. We staff it through our analysts, our historians, we staff it through our lab personnel. And then it goes through several levels of leadership until it comes to the level for a decision. And if it's approved, then that case gets added to our master excavation list, which you'll hear referred to as the MEL, because we all love acronyms, right? When that case is added to the MEL, then it's a matter of our planners getting it onto the calendar, and a lot of things affect that. You know, when it's going to get dug, is the site in danger? It goes higher on the list if it's in danger. It's a higher priority. But our goal as analysts, researchers, field team, we want to get that case on the excavation list. You know, for us, that's a touchdown, and then we're hoping that when they dig in the field, they get what we're looking for. So this case was approved. It was added to the master excavation list, but there's a caveat. Leadership said, we know you're close. We're up there on the mountain. We know we're really, really close, but it is a big area. So it's approved, but leadership wanted us to bring some SOG veterans back with us who could help us get to X marks the spot. And we did that. And to tell you all about that, next slide, I'll be followed by Dr. Nicolette Parr, forensic anthropologist with the lab. She's done a lot of digs in the field, and she's also the Vietnam War Identification Project lead. So it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Parr.
Hi, good morning. It is truly an honor to be here and speak with you today. I was really lucky to be able to meet some of you when you came for the lab tour in May. Can you hear me okay? I'm a little short, so I have to adjust the microphone. I am, as Matt said, I am a forensic anthropologist within the DPAA laboratory in Hawaii, and also a scientific recovery expert, which means I do actively go out and conduct excavations in the field. My most recent excavation was in Laos. I spent about 2 months there in January and February earlier this year. Next slide. So what I'm going to do today is just give you a brief walkthrough of the role of the lab in doing these case analyses. So we'll start by talking about Sergeant Jones's case and the field recovery with the search and recovery of his remains. And then I'll take a brief pause with Sergeant Jones's story, just so I can talk to you a little bit more generally about our laboratory operations, essentially giving you a virtual tour of the lab and talk about the different types of analyses that we do within our laboratories. And then lastly, we'll go back to talking about Sergeant Jones's case and walk you through the identification process. Before I really begin, I want to let you know that there are going to be photos of human remains in this presentation. I do want you to know that these remains are for exemplary purposes only, and none of these remains that are being presented are those of Sergeant Jones or any of the remains that were recovered in the field. Next slide. So to begin talking about field operations, the field operations is really a multidisciplinary effort that is led by our scientific recovery expert, which is usually either a forensic anthropologist or forensic archaeologist within the lab. We work very closely with expeditionary support, and they serve as the nucleus to orchestrate critical mission functions. And I'm going to let Master Sergeant Sievert here come and talk to you a little bit about expeditionary support.
Morning. Can everyone hear me, or do I need the microphone? Hell yeah, I still got it. All right. Hey, so my name's Master Sergeant Benjamin Sievert. I'm the Army Senior Enlisted Leader in Expeditionary Support NCOIC for the DPAA. I just took over in August, and it's a privilege to be a part of the organization. I listen to a lot of SOGcasts, so I still have a mission focus, and I really do enjoy this mission. I appreciate being here. So for the expeditionary support, we're comprised of roughly around 80 people. It's a joint environment working with Air Force, Marines, Navy, and Army, and it's a very diverse element to where I have infantrymen, vertical engineers, MPs, field artillery, mortuary fears. It's very diverse. All right, but we're broken down into eight sections. We got our ops section, we have 4 recovery sections, and then we have our specialties of dive, EOD, and mountains. All right, I look at us as like the action arm. We work side by side with this scientific recovery expert. We work side by side in the whole planning process and really go through that operations order. But then we are the action arm who assist in providing that team leader and team sergeant to act as the main group of accountability for the military personnel. And then we focus on phase 3 of the operations order, which is execution, and side by side with the SRE.
Thank you. I do want for you to know that I was not the SRE who conducted this recovery. The SRE who conducted this recovery is Miss Kristen Baker, and that is her in this photo right here. She is a forensic archaeologist who works at our DPAA headquarters. Next slide. So here you can see some before and after imagery of Hickory Hill before and after the 1971 bombardment. The red square highlights Sergeant Jones's last known location, which I will refer to as bunker number 2. There's 2 bunkers, so I'll talk to you about bunker 1 later. The top photo shows before, and then the bottom photo shows after the bombardment. And this is important, one, because it shows the high number of UXOs that were dropped on this site, which were truly extensive. So that is something that we need to mitigate so that we can even just access and conduct any kind of recovery operations. But additionally, this is also incredibly important because it highlights some of the challenges that we have when we're working in Southeast Asia, and particularly this site with the amount of landscape change that will occur due to these types of bombardments. So this, when you have so many bombs that are dropped on a site like this is going to significantly impact the distribution of evidence and the distribution of human skeletal remains. So when we are conducting these excavations in Southeast Asia, we are really almost never dealing with an intact and pristine site, as I think is a common misconception. Usually we have these sites that have really changed over the course of time, both through natural processes and also man-made modifications. This site is also an active training ground for the Vietnamese army. So they were conducting operations and also modifying, building trenches in this area. So there's all kinds of land modifications that the scientific recovery expert needs to take into account as they are conducting the excavations. Next slide. In this photo here, this is some of the photos that was discussed earlier. So this is a photograph of Sergeant Jones standing with one of the Montagnard soldiers, and the writing on the photograph is that of Mr. Caviani. And he basically, working with the SRE, he was really instrumental with helping us understand the layout of the site better. So the yellow and the red are highlighting, again, the bunkers 1 and bunker 2, bunker 1 in the yellow, bunker 2 in the red. And in the photo, you can see Sergeant Jones, and Mr. Caviani has written on the photograph is that the bunker 1 that's kind of in that far corner on the upper photo, that is where Sergeant Jones's last known location is. That's where he was shot. And then the bunker number 1 was where Mr. Caviani went and was hiding when the attack occurred. Next slide. So arriving on site was a feat in itself. So it was a 20-minute drive from the nearest town, followed by a 20-minute hike up to the base camp, and then from the base camp, it was another 50-minute hike up to the top of Hickory Hill. Fortunately, we were able to have all of our supplies heloed in, so we did not have to carry those in ourselves. And here you can see Mr. Caviani and Mr. Page arriving on site. And I believe Mr. Page may be with us today. I know I had the honor of meeting him last night. Hi, thank you. Thank you for being here. Next slide, please. So the first couple of things that we do when we arrive on site, especially one that has such significant amount of UXO, is going to be the UXO clearance. So we have EOD techs that work to clear the site, and really we're not gonna do anything. We're not gonna clear the site of vegetation. We're not gonna start the survey, because we need to make sure that the site is going to be safe for both ourselves, but also the local workers that are helping us do the recovery. So we start with the UXO clearance, and then the clearance of the vegetation, so we can really get a better lay of the land. I tell my teams when I go out that they're gonna see me spend a lot of time staring at the ground. I feel like I wanna move away here, but I know you won't hear me. But I spend a lot of time looking at the ground, and I think that they think that maybe I'm confused, but it's that I'm reading the soil. I'm reading the stratigraphy. So I'm looking to see different features to help me get a better idea of where to excavate. And in this case, Mr. Caviani, Mr. Page were really instrumental on helping us do the initial site survey, because they were able to point out the essential area of where the bunker 2 may be located. So we started with doing this initial site survey, and the initial site survey is extremely important for the SRE who's conducting the survey, because it allows us to delineate the site boundaries, but then also determine the methods and techniques that we want to use to conduct these excavations. And then once the site survey has been conducted, we will move on to emplacing the grid. And the grid is essentially our map that we follow when we start to do our recovery and excavation operations. Next slide. Here you can see a few photos from the excavation of the site itself. We typically conduct our excavations in 4x4 meter units, which is basically just a 4x4 meter square. And all of our excavations are conducted in a very systematic and scientific way. We're not going out there just digging holes. We are doing it consistently at various stratigraphic levels so that we can see everything that is coming out of the soil. We will start out by doing using things like shovels and kind of heavier machinery to do the excavations. And then once we think that we have found human skeletal remains, we'll do more fine-grained hand excavations using a trowel. Everything that we excavate, all of the sediment, all of the soil gets screened through a screening station with 1/4-inch mesh. And every single thing that is found in the ground gets put in a bucket, and I will personally look at it along with my life support investigator. And so we're looking at everything, looking for either bone or material evidence that might be coming out of the field. I tell my team I would rather look at 200 pieces of rock or wood than miss a bone. So I spend a lot of time staring at rocks and at bone with the hopes that I might find a couple of pieces of bone. And these methods are important because this is actually the exact same methods that we would utilize if we were conducting an excavation of the pyramids in Egypt or on any kind of modern day forensic recovery. This is actually the exact same methods that we used when the DPAA was recently called to conduct search and recovery efforts in Maui to help with the Lahaina wildfires. We were there for just over a month conducting search and recovery excavations. And interestingly, we were called out to two areas to look for remains that the original search and recovery teams had already gone to, had searched, they didn't find anything, and they said it was clear. We were called back out to these sites, and upon arrival, using these same methods, we were able to find remains of missing individuals. So I think that just highlights the really unique skill set that the scientists at DPAA have in order to conduct these types of missions. Next slide. As I mentioned, there was a lot of bombs dropped in this area. The excavation team found over 77 UXO on site. There were 2 DPAA EOD techs that were on this team, and we also contracted local EOD techs from the Vietnamese Army to help mitigate and conduct these, clearing the UXO so that we could continue to excavate in a timely manner, because if we had to close down the site every time we found the UXO, we never would have been able to finish the excavation. Next slide. What you're looking at here is a bird's eye view of a map of the excavation area. So you can see both bunkers 1 and bunker 2, and those squares are essentially just the grids, the units, the areas that we excavated. Like I said, all of our excavation is very systematic. We conducted excavation over the course of 27 days on this site, and we excavated approximately 120 square meters to a maximum depth of 110 centimeters. And during the course of this recovery, we were able to find skeletal remains, being both skeletal and dental remains, as well as material evidence, which I will discuss a little bit later. Next slide. These photos show the final photo of the recovery location. And what is really important and what I want to highlight here, in the top photo, you can see the 3 arrows are pointing out engineering stakes.